You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're with another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. You know, it has popularly been said that if you're going to lead others, you first need to lead yourself. So my guest today is going to help us with some ideas, thoughts, and tips on doing just that. Her name is Irene Riad. Irene, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Doug. Pleasure to be here.
So as is a little bit of a custom here, give us your backstory, if you will, just a short recap of how you got to where you are today and what piqued your attention for the work you're doing today.
Absolutely. So I have been in the corporate world for about 20 years, mainly in the talent development, leadership assessment, and talent management area. And it was during my growth in the corporate world where I was looking at training, assessment, development, that coaching or actually conversations grabbed my attention. And that's where transformation happened in a conversation, not really in a training room or from an assessment report, although they brought insight. And some breakthrough wisdom, which is great, but it was a conversation that really made learning stick and transform people. And it was 18 years ago, while I was still in the corporate world, thinking, okay, this conversation, which turned out to become a profession called coaching, is an area that I really wanted to focus on. So I started my coaching kind of credibility with accreditation and all these different programs. And coaching has been the backbone of everything I did in the corporate world for those 20 years. So I delved into emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, physical intelligence, mental, all the dimensions of a human. And it was only 4 years ago when I realized, okay, corporate world, thank you very much. I'm going to really put my head down and really hone my craft. And so I took my coaching into deeper levels of more of the conscious and subconscious and body-related work, emotional release, things that are related to setbacks, trauma, things of that kind. And I merged the two so I could speak and help with leaders who have significant setbacks, work on their transformation from a psychological standpoint and from a body transformation standpoint. And that's where I am today. I'm running my own coaching business, just solely focused on these kind of transformations for leaders.
Awesome. Well, it is popularly said in many circles that to be in a position of leadership, you do have to have the right mindset. And while I have come to believe that's definitely important, I think that if you just zero in on that, you're going to eliminate all the other human dynamic that goes with it. You might have the best intended thought and attitude about what you're doing, but if the pressures of your work or the burdens of your responsibility have made you sick, literally physically sick, you're not going to be your best self showing up in that moment. So being able to lead and manage all facets of that human existence on a personal level is so really vital. So let me ask you, where do you start with someone? If someone rings the phone and says, Irene, I need your help, where do you begin with a new client?
I begin where they are. So many of the clients do come with a certain challenge that they have, and usually they're thinking about it, so it's very cognitive, and so they tell the story of what happened. So I meet them more from a thinking level, and usually that's where they are. But there are some people who come and say, I'm just burned out. My body's not able to keep moving. I mean, I want to do this, and but something's, so then it's not really they're thinking about it, but I need to connect with what's happening with the body. Where's the tension? And so it's one of those two usually, but more likely they have a language for it. So we look at how are they making meaning of their situation. So I meet them where they are from the context of what's the meaning that they've put onto what's happening. And hearing them out allows me to understand actually their worldview, because that's one of the things I look at. How do they see the world in terms of how do they see the other? Like, is the world a good place or a bad place? Is the world easy or difficult? Is there always enough or there's not enough? So the understanding their story, and their story is real. I'm not saying it's not real or that it's not the real story, but how they look at even themselves in the story. Are they more of a victim? Are they more of a warrior? Are they more of a carer? So I put labels on them just so that we can bring some language, but to understand where they are, how they define their story is step one.
That's really fascinating, I think, because again, I think it's one thing to talk about having the right mindset, but what drives that and any ability for any kind of change or shift is that story you're already telling yourself. And I do a lot of work, as most of my followers know. I do work in the Hogan assessment space, and one of the things Dr. Hogan advocates is that we have this thing known as our identity, and that essentially is the story we've created for ourselves, whether it's fair and accurate or whether it's a little bit tainted, comes from a lot of our experiences and our developmental opportunities or not. And it's that story that plays in our head, that streaming video that goes on in our head, that often holds us back from what could be, great opportunity. So I do see, and I know for many this starts sounding like, well, you're going to be a therapist, and the idea is no, it's not about therapy, but it's about addressing that reality that you've created for yourself and talking through how that aligns or not with where you want to go and what you want to accomplish with yourself, your team, your business, or for that matter, your life.
Absolutely. I also don't see this as a therapy conversation at all. Actually, I see it more of a conditioning, because it's not about being broken or having a broken story. Because one principle I have and I share with my clients all the time, and I remind them because it slips our mind, that I firmly believe he and everyone is never broken, because I don't see us as a body, a physical body. I define humans and humanity as essentially soul. Like, we're never broken, but we're conditioned out of our circumstances and the life that we've gone through and the events that happened to us conditioned us to be in a certain way, or had as like a big imprint. I'm now geared up to respond or react in a certain way. It's not a broken way. It served me earlier because it kept me safe. And I think understanding the basics of humanity is also part of psychology. Like understanding a child, how they grow up, how do they find their sense of identity and safety? Because we've all been that child. So because that child has had to find safety or identity in a certain way, doesn't mean that they got broken. It's just that we have not adapted now a new way when we've kind of stepped out of this childhood phase. Nobody was teaching us a new way. And so as adults, I think it's very healthy, even in our own evolution as adults, to figure out what are these patterns that allowed me great progress earlier in life, but now seem to be holding me back. Like the book of What Got Me Here Won't Get You There. What got us here won't get you there. It's because there's a new way of thinking. Mind and body need to align, because I believe a second half of life, our soul is calling for something larger. Purpose, if we call it that way. There's something larger than safety and routine and productivity.
Well, I happen to align with that. I agree. There's always a value in doing work with clients to try to focus on and talk a little bit about whether or not they have that sense of purpose, and what is it and how is it showing up in the way they style their leadership presence and how they might show up for others. And too often, certainly in the corporate world, people get on a so-called career track, and they move from job to job, station to station, and eventually the journey of that track, it might be serving the business very well, but it doesn't necessarily serve the individual very well for aligning that sense of greater good and purpose that might be, buried very deep within.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes it's when leaders say, I don't know my purpose, or I'm not sure how to start looking for it. And I think the simplest thing, it's not something you look for. I think it's something that evolves as you start to understand yourself more. So let's kind of put that purpose thing aside. Yes, we'd like to find out, like, where's our North Star, so that we can become a bit more happier and fulfilled. But that will come. Let's just focus on what are your values, what are your dreams, what fulfills you, what empowers you. Get to know you as a leader, what limits you, what holds you back. And in that, which is what you said earlier, self-leadership, like really understanding yourself on a deeper level, because you've changed. Again, I may have had values 5 years ago that I don't necessarily hold all of them now. Things have shifted. Something maybe have happened in my life. Now I realize, oh, well, health is number one. I mean, it was like number 6 before. So things have shifted, and we don't keep track of our own shifts. And then that will bring to light, like, the North Star, the purpose, and it'll start to color the next step in the career ladder. And I totally agree. We get into a pathway in the corporate world, and I used to be one of those people who would draw out career plans for leaders in companies, and it would be like, well, how do we move horizontally? How do we move diagonally? Because not everybody's going to move vertically, and it makes sense. The company cannot even provide for everyone to move vertically. And so these discussions, when had in organizational context, actually are very beneficial, because then a leader starts to see more opportunity in an organization and be ready to move, because he or she has uncovered a little bit more of a different desire than the one being told to him or to her.
Well, and I think all of that also ties to this idea of conditioning, which we talked about. As your sense of self and sense of direction does evolve, it is influenced heavily by the conditioning you've already been through. And real quick, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because it's pertinent here. Back in 2008, when the U.S. had its big economic crisis, and I know it was going on around the world, There were huge layoffs, and people who had been on a career for 10, 15, even 20 years were being let go for the first time ever in their life. And I had created a nonprofit organization to coach and counsel these individuals and steer them toward ways to find a new opportunity, a new job, and move on. But what I quickly learned, I had not anticipated this, but it became very obvious to me very early in the process. People, especially those who were losing a job for the first time ever, they had never been fired or let go or outplaced. Their whole sense of identity was gone. Because now they were no longer an engineer or an accountant or a design professional or a HR professional, or that had been taken away from them. And what I started doing, and we very quickly, when we opened our doors, our numbers grew rapidly. We were having 200 and 300 people come to our weekly events. And what I would do when I would meet a new person, I started saying, "Tell me something about yourself." And if they started down the path of, "Well, I'm an accountant or I'm an engineer or blah, blah, blah," I'd go, "Nope, wrong answer." "Tell me about you." And they would, without exception, it was kind of I'm not sure I know how to answer that question. And that became kind of an underlying theme of all the work we did. It was, let's help you discover you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can start targeting opportunities out in the marketplace that might be a better fit. And it was really inspiring and in some cases very amazing how radical the shifts were of the work people used to do versus where they were now trying to go. And what came of that is when someone was showing up to interview for a new opportunity aligned with their sense of self, there was a whole new energy that showed up, and it was really almost undeniable. And we had a very good success rate with people finding new jobs even in a bad economy.
That's profound transformation. That's what I would say, because it's helping people align their heart, their soul to a purpose in a workplace, and that's not easy to find if you're not taking time to reflect and figure out who are you.
Right.
You said radical. It's actually the title of my upcoming book. It's coming first week of March sometime, called Radical Becoming. I'm writing it with the author Brian Tracy, legend Brian Tracy. And it talks about this process of becoming, which is that evolving into understanding who you are, actually allows you to have these radical spurts in life, growth. Yeah.
When we were prepping for the show, Irene, we were talking a little bit, timing-wise, we're recording this still in the month of January. It's probably going to be released later, but we were talking about classic, it's the new year. People sometimes turn their attention to either resolutions or some other form of change they might want to contemplate. You use the word renewal. Tell us a little more about that idea.
So renewal is a process I take my clients through. It is in terms of the word itself, renewing one's not just thoughts and one's context, career, but renewal of the identity is what I really start to focus. What are you renewing about yourself in order to become that person who's going to achieve your goals? As an acronym, it also is something I use where people start to hone the renewal process, because I say it's a process. It's not a one-time thing. It's something we always do. So renewing is around recognizing the voices in your head. So it helps us figure out which voice is coming from where And there's an element of knowing which voices are coming from society asking me to do things versus the voices of who am I really? What is it that I dream of? E is around engaging with what's coming up in your body. So being open to look at the feelings of fear, the feelings of excitement, noticing, because they give us information about what we are thinking about. N is around navigating this next level. So if you're going through something that's, you figured out the voice that you want to follow a new career path, you've overcome this engagement with your body, how are you going to navigate that fear? Moving through some threshold of resistance or working with resistance. And then the rest of the letters will take us through, I don't want to take all, the rest of the letters will take us through how do we actually bring that to alignment, and how do we ensure that our leadership is showing up with that alignment, because then I take them through not just your thoughts and body, but what is your alignment to the higher purpose? How do I bring that to your leadership, and how is that leadership or the leader that you are becoming aligned to the legacy? I call the legacy because I actually demand from myself to live my legacy now, not something I will leave behind. So you showing up fully in a renewed sense of purpose, renewed sense of identity is a great legacy. You inspire people. But doing it through a process that allows you to reflect on thoughts, engage with your body, and navigate resistance, and then the rest would be around looking at how that connects to a higher purpose, I find brings fulfillment to my clients, and is something we would benefit from, continuously renewing who we are.
It's interesting you brought up the idea of legacy. That is an element that I found many years ago was very valuable, because as you know, I'm sure in the coaching realm, it's not uncommon to be approached by a large business, large company. They want to bring in coaching to help their leaders or help their people. And sometimes the clients you end up taking on in that sort of thing aren't necessarily totally eager about it. It's just something they've been told to do because that's what the company is offering. And what I discovered a number of years ago when I was confronted with an older executive who was on the glide slope for, retiring and going out the door, but maybe it was still 3 to 5, maybe 6, 8 years away. They would often tell me, I'm going to be retiring soon. Why do I need a coach? What do I need to be doing? And I would ask them that question: have you thought about your legacy here or in this industry? And I've actually had clients who that question alone kind of brought them to tears, because they're dealing with this inevitable reality that, the game they've been in for so long may be coming to an end. And the profound question is, has it mattered? Does it matter? And kind of that search for personal significance that many people struggle with. So what I tell them is, since the company's providing you this coaching opportunity, why don't we define that legacy, and why don't we look for opportunities that you can do something different to have that story change? If the story's not what you want it to be right now, why don't we change that? You say you still got a few years left. Let's start today. Let's get that change in motion. And they light up and they go, that's great. That's what I want to do. That I definitely. And it has become a really powerful driver, particularly, like I say, for those clients I run into that are a little bit later in the game.
I love that story. It's fascinating. And I think we all, I'm going to say the word I shouldn't say, should. We all would benefit from actually thinking about our legacy today. Because you could start living it anytime, as early as you figure it out. And again, it evolves. It doesn't have to stay the same thing for a whole 50 years. So I see legacy as something I'm living every day. How am I showing up? Because I know there's a societal understanding of legacy being things left behind, like assets or finances, and maybe there's a place for that. But I'd love to change the narrative around, actually, I see us as a legacy. I see you as a legacy, because it's a living, breathing energy that's influencing people. And so when I shift the narrative around legacy being it's you, but you stepping into your full purpose, you undergo the changes of renewing who you are, renewing what you stand for. And then it's every day you're living with purpose. Purpose just comes naturally once I figured out, who am I influencing today? What's a great thing I can do for myself, for another person? And I think we become a bit more fulfilled, even when with a busy life, or doing a corporate job, or not working if we're a home parent. You're still doing something with the concept of you being a legacy, living for influencing great things in children and parents and colleagues. And yeah, I think it just adds a little bit more value to the work that we do.
I agree. Totally agree. Let's go back to the idea of this renewal. And the other thing you and I had talked about in the green room was the fact that it's one thing to sort of intentionally go into a moment of evaluating and reviewing, current state versus the to be, where do I want to go? But let's talk about the process to get that going and keep it going.
Okay. So once you've recognized what it is that you're challenged with, and I call it voices. So what's the limitation? What's the fear? What's the story? However it is coming up. And then we've taken it down from the mind to, so what's happening in the body? And usually there's a bit more around, so helping people understand their nervous system. So sensations versus meaning. So because when you get down to sensations, then you're becoming a little bit less in your mind. So what's happening to your heart rate, to your sweaty hands, to whatever in your throat, chest, and then spending time to actually notice that our body does send us messages sometimes before our mind brings a story. But this connection is important. Once we've understand, for example, a leader who had just lost a business deal, like let's say something was supposed to go, it didn't. So they recognize all the voices in the head. I was this, I was that, or I missed this, or what's happening to my body. I feel the intensity. I feel like I can't breathe, or I'm angry. I just want to punch someone, whatever it is. Okay. Now, what that happens just with those two conversations, the body starts to feel that it's been heard, it's felt, and we settle down a little bit to start to uncover, okay, what is this setback or this feeling telling me? And there's a little bit of work we can do, inner work, staying with the emotion and understanding what the emotion wants to say. It's usually trying to understand, what is the silver lining here? What am I to learn? Because if I just stay in a conversation where I'm angry, I'm not going to learn what I can learn. Now we go into the end where I'm navigating this. Okay, I've learned that perhaps I need to value my opinion. Like when I was in that meeting and I let go of a certain topic, that was the break or make, and my ego wanted something, just to get at, like, how do we navigate fear of loss? Maybe the fear of loss made me latch on so strong that people rejected to work with me, and so I lost the deal. Navigating that tension requires some work, is recognizing it, leaning into it, and then noticing what would make me, in this situation, what makes me What makes me have that fear of loss? What am I fearing to lose? Will I lose my worth if my recommendation was not taken? Will I lose finances? What am I losing? Because the attachment to loss keeps us in a cycle of scarcity thinking, of loss, and we keep pushing more than being confident with the other party, knowing that we will get what we deserve if we're fair and we're thinking of fairness. So these first 3 steps are the core. Then once we've unlocked thought, mind, and understand the tension, so loss and openness to loss, not being afraid of losing. How can I be with both? Once we move into the next part where is the other E, is we elevate our identity. We become someone who, it's a mindset and identity, as we said earlier, not just mindset alone, but my mind will start to tell me, careful the loss, but my identity will say, well, I'm okay with the loss. I do want to risk taking this big deal, offering a big thing, and be confident that they will say, yes, I'll handle the loss if there is a loss, versus me pushing because I'm afraid to lose. The energy is different. And so this process of stepping up and becoming a bigger self requires us to step out of an ego, afraid of loss, afraid of not winning, whatever it was that kind of pushed us to push too hard, for example. The W is around, okay, now that I've understood the process until now, how do I work through maintaining this bigger identity of not being afraid to lose, not in a context where I'm going for another big deal. I'm going into a big negotiation now. I could lose a lot if I'm not blah, blah, blah. Instead of having that being in my head, work on myself. The R is that renewed, what new thoughts? So how do I think in a more creative space? And then how do I think in a creative space means I need to be able to connect that to a bigger purpose, knowing that this big deal will take me forward to be able to serve more people. If I have a big partnership, yes, I have a big negotiation, think of the impact I could have on the people. And then the L is leading with that legacy, because legacy is part of my renewal. So if you have this big partnership, and it's aligned with your purpose, how are you going to, leading with that in mind allows you to step into more of what you're here to do. And so the renewal are like just the letters of connecting us from that very first thought up until how do I work with it to be okay with the fear that it brings, because a thought, if it's not aligned with a higher self, it will try to keep us safe, and it keeps us small, and it keeps us careful, and all of that work that the ego works hard to do because it keeps us safe. But then and then it's a cycle. And the more we do it, the more the thoughts will become larger, because we will become larger. So it grows us, but we'll still have those thoughts that want to keep us safe because we're on to a bigger dream and another bigger dream and another bigger deal. And so it's human nature. We will have the thought, but noticing that you are not the thought, you have them, and now knowing how to work with them, with the body. So I'm not stuck in a story, and that I could actually ground myself and face my fear and take the step that does seem uncomfortable, that does feel scary, and work with that resistance. So it widens our capacity to withstand more pressure.
When we do talk about doing the work, I think about the idea, this is where sports analogies always come into the coaching game. And, when we identify a shift, a change that the client agrees needs to be made, then doing the work to implement that change often requires simple repetition. You've got a moment. Is that a moment where you can exercise that shift and show up differently and be that different identity that you've agreed you want to be? But you got to keep practicing. You have to keep doing the repetition for it to become part of your more conditioned response to things. Just like an athlete, when the coach says, change your footwork or change the grip on your racket or your club, it's awkward. It doesn't feel right. It's strange. But when you keep doing the repetition and you start getting the better result that you had hoped for, you realize, all right, that was the answer. That is what I need to be doing. And so I see that work element being part of that it does require that constant repetition. And as I encourage my clients, when we're talking about growth and change of this kind, you are going to encounter the classic 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There will be the moment you're going to show up and you're going to be your old self, and you're going to maybe be frustrated and say, oh man, here I go again. Why did I do that? Well, just recognize that that's part of the journey, and it's going to be okay. Call it what it was. And now, think about the next opportunity and do the work to show up differently that next time.
Absolutely. So it's having understanding and compassion to ourselves is really important, because it'll keep us doing the work. If I kick myself every time, I will lose the intention of trying to make any change. So being kind to ourselves is really helpful.
Very good. Well, Irene, thank you so much for doing this. I know we're about up on time for today, but this has been a real joy to visit with you. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more about your work.
I love the time together, Doug, as well. Love the discussion, and would love to connect with anybody on LinkedIn through Irene Riad, same spelling, and on my website, www.sightset.com. Either of them, would love to connect.
Very good. Well, again, thank you so much for your time being with us and sharing this valuable information about kind of getting into that core self to make the change you may want to be making so that you can be that better leader for the greater good. And as always, folks, we're going to have Irene's contact info in our show notes. You can hop down and check that out and mash the links that'll be there. I do like to remind you, we've got a video version of this show over on YouTube, a channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. If you need any direct help from me or my team, drop over to my website at Doug Thorpe, THORPE.com. And there's plenty of contact points there on the web. But for now, I think that's about it. We're going to sign off, say goodbye, go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.